What if I told you that Iran's role in biblical prophecy is far greater than you ever imagined? This isn't just about politics or history, it's about prophecy. Because long before Iran made headlines in today's news, it stood at the center of some of the Bible's most powerful and mysterious revelations. Known in ancient times as Persia, this land was home to kings, empires, and divine intervention. From the bloodline of Noah's son Shem came nations that would rise and fall, but Persia stood out. And then came King Cyrus the Great, a Persian ruler not just remembered by historians, but honored in the Bible itself. Isaiah prophesied his coming over a century before he was born, and when he rose to power, Cyrus did something no one expected. He released the Jewish people from captivity and funded the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. Why would a pagan king fulfill a divine mission? Because God's plan often unfolds in the most unexpected ways through people and nations we least expect. And Persia, now Iran, remains a nation that continues to echo through prophecy. From Daniel's visions to Ezekiel's end-time alliances, Iran's name keeps appearing, not as an afterthought, but as a key player in God's unfolding story for the world. So if you've overlooked Iran's role in Scripture, it's time to take another look. Forget what you thought you knew about Bible history. This isn't just another story about kings and kingdoms. This is about a nation chosen by God to shift the course of destiny. Iran, known in the Bible as Persia, long before modern conflicts and political tensions, Persia was already playing a vital role in the divine narrative. It's mentioned by name in books like Daniel, Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Esther, not as a side note, but as a key player in the unfolding plan of redemption. It began with Noah. His son Shem became the ancestor of the Semitic peoples, and among his descendants came the Persians. They rose to power not by accident, but by design. Then came Cyrus the Great, a pagan king, named by the prophet Isaiah over a century before his birth. God called him his anointed, a title rarely given outside of Israel. Why? Because Cyrus would do what no one else could: free the Israelites from Babylonian captivity, restore their hope, and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. This wasn't political strategy. It was prophecy fulfilled. Persia became the unexpected vessel of deliverance, a foreign power used by the hand of God. But the story doesn't stop there. From the ancient courts of Cyrus the Great to the end-time alliances foretold in prophecy, Iran, the modern name for Persia, continues to occupy a central place in God's redemptive narrative. Its presence in Scripture isn't confined to a single era. It stretches across time, connecting the past to the future in a way that few nations do. Many are surprised to learn that Iran is mentioned in some of the Bible's most significant prophetic passages. In the book of Ezekiel, Persia is named among the nations that will rise in the last days, part of a coalition that will come against Israel. But don't mistake this for random geopolitics. These prophecies were penned thousands of years ago. Yet today's headlines often echo their ancient words. It's a powerful reminder that history doesn't move on its own. It flows according to the hand of the Creator. But what's truly astonishing is not just Persia's involvement in the end times. It's how God used this very empire for good. Pagan kings, men who worshipped foreign gods and ruled vast territories, were chosen by the God of Israel to set his people free, fund the rebuilding of his temple, and fulfill ancient words spoken by prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah. Cyrus, for example, was named by Isaiah over a century before he was born, called God's anointed, though he didn't even know the God who called him. This raises a profound truth. God's sovereignty is not limited by human allegiance. He moves through whomever he chooses, even those outside the covenant community, to fulfill his purposes on earth. Persia was not just a tool of history, it was an instrument of prophecy. In this video, we're going to uncover how the ancient people of Persia came to power, how they impacted the lives of God's chosen people, and why their legacy is still unfolding today. Whether it's Daniel's visions, Ezekiel's prophecies, or the courageous story of Esther, the fingerprints of Persia are everywhere in Scripture. Get ready to see Iran not just through political or cultural lenses, but through the lens of eternity as a nation that, from the beginning, has played a role in a much larger story, the story of God redeeming His world. To understand Iran's biblical roots, we must go back to the story of Noah and his descendants. After the Great Flood, Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the ancestors of all nations of the earth. According to the Table of Nations in Genesis 10, one of Japheth's sons was Madai, the progenitor of the Medes. The Medes would later become closely associated with the Persians, and together they formed the foundation of the Medo-Persian Empire, one of the most powerful empires in world history. Madai's descendants, the Medes, settled in the region that would become modern-day Iran. The Persians, emerging from the same geographical area, would rise to prominence later. But both groups shared a common Iranian ancestry. So, according to the Bible, the ancestors of the Iranians come from Japheth through Madai, which places the Iranian people in the biblical narrative from the very beginning of post-flood history. This connection links the Iranian people to one of the oldest genealogies in the Bible and sets the stage for their significant role in the history of God's people. Fast forward several centuries, and we find the rise of Persia, a kingdom that would play a crucial role in the biblical narrative. The Medes and Persians formed an alliance under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, who founded the Achaemenid Empire, also known as the First Persian Empire, at its height. The Persian Empire stretched from the Indus River to North Africa, encompassing many of the major regions mentioned in the Bible, including Israel, Babylon, and Egypt. But Persia's significance goes far beyond its military and territorial might. Its importance lies in the way God used it to fulfill His promises to the Israelites. The Babylonian Empire, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, had conquered Jerusalem in 586 BC, destroyed the temple, and taken the people of Judah into exile. The Israelites remained in Babylonian captivity for 70 years, as prophesied by Jeremiah. Then came Cyrus the Great, a Persian king who conquered Babylon in 539 BC, and with him, everything changed. The book of Ezra opens with a decree from Cyrus, allowing the Israelites to return to their land and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. This event is recorded in Ezra 1:1-4, where Cyrus declares, "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and has appointed me to build a temple for Him at Jerusalem in Judah." Cyrus, a pagan king, was named over a century earlier by the prophet Isaiah as the one who would carry out God's will to restore Israel. In one of the most astonishing moments in biblical history, Persia, a nation outside of God's covenant, became the instrument of God's redemption for His people. This marked a profound turning point for Israel and highlighted the central role of Persia in God's divine plan. One of the most remarkable elements of Persia's biblical legacy is the role of Cyrus the Great. In Isaiah 44:28, God refers to Cyrus by name more than 150 years before his birth, calling him his shepherd who will fulfill God's purposes. In Isaiah 45:1, Cyrus is even referred to as God's anointed, a title usually reserved for kings of Israel. How could a foreign, pagan king be called God's anointed? The answer lies in God's sovereignty and his ability to use anyone, even those outside of his covenant people, to accomplish his will. Cyrus's decree to allow the Jews to return and rebuild the temple was not just a political move, it was a prophetic fulfillment. The prophet Jeremiah had foretold that the Babylonian captivity would last 70 years. Jeremiah 25:11-12, Jeremiah 29:10. And Cyrus's rise to power marked the end of that period. The rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem under the leadership of Zerubbabel with the blessing of Cyrus was a key step in the restoration of Israel. God had used Persia not only to defeat Babylon, the nation that had oppressed Israel, but also to facilitate Israel's rebirth as a nation. This was a reminder to Israel and to the world that God's plan is far greater than any one empire, and He can use even the most unlikely figures to bring about His purposes. Persia's role in biblical history doesn't end with Cyrus and the rebuilding of the temple. The Book of Esther provides another powerful example of how Persia was used by God to protect His people. During the reign of King Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus in the Bible, a plot was hatched by Haman, an official in the Persian court, to exterminate the Jews living in the empire. Haman's hatred for the Jews drove him to manipulate the king into issuing a decree that would allow for their annihilation. However, through God's providence, a young Jewish woman named Esther had become the queen of Persia. Encouraged by her uncle Mordecai, Esther took a bold and dangerous step by approaching the king and revealing her Jewish identity, pleading for the survival of her people. Esther 4:14 highlights the famous words of Mordecai to Esther, "Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Esther's intervention resulted in a dramatic reversal. King Xerxes, upon learning of Haman's treachery, ordered his execution, and a new decree was issued, allowing the Jews to defend themselves against their enemies. In the heart of the Persian Empire, one of the greatest kingdoms the world had ever seen, a hidden drama was unfolding. A story not just of royalty and intrigue, but of survival and divine intervention. It all began when a young Jewish woman named Hadassah, known to the Persians as Esther, was unexpectedly chosen to become queen. She was taken from a humble life and placed in a world of wealth, power, and danger, all under the shadow of a king who didn't even know her true identity. But this wasn't coincidence. Behind the scenes, God was orchestrating something far greater. Esther's rise to royalty came at a critical moment. A powerful advisor in the Persian court, filled with hatred for the Jewish people, devised a plan to wipe them out entirely. A decree was issued. The date was set. The future of God's people hung in the balance. But God had already positioned His answer right in the palace. Esther, though fearful, was called upon to act. Her cousin Mordecai's words echoed through history. "Perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this, and with courage and wisdom." Esther approached the king, risking her life to plead for her people. Her bravery turned the tide. The king listened. The plot was exposed. The enemy's plan was reversed, and the Jewish people were saved. This powerful account, recorded in the Book of Esther, is remembered every year during the Jewish festival of Purim, a celebration of deliverance, hope, and the unseen hand of God. And once again, Persia, though a foreign empire, became the unlikely stage where God's protection was revealed. Through a young woman's obedience and a nation's influence, the people of Israel were preserved. It's a timeless reminder that even in exile, even in the darkest plots, God is present. And sometimes, He uses the most unexpected people, in the most unlikely places, to accomplish His purpose. God's hand was evident throughout the story, using the Persian Empire as a backdrop for this miraculous deliverance of the Jews from annihilation. This further demonstrates how Persia, though not part of the covenant people of Israel, continued to play a crucial role in the unfolding of God's plan. Persia wasn't merely a passive observer. It was an active participant in ensuring the survival of Israel, a nation destined to bring forth the Messiah. The Bible isn't merely a record of ancient events. It's a prophetic lens revealing the past, present, and future. Persia, known today as Iran, isn't just a name that appears in historical chapters. It stands at the center of divine visions that reach far beyond its time. Through the scriptures, Persia becomes more than a regional power. It becomes part of God's blueprint for the world. Nowhere is this more striking than in the book of Daniel. Daniel wasn't just a prophet, he was a statesman, a visionary who served under both Babylonian and Persian rule during Israel's exile. Amid empires that rose and fell, Daniel remained steadfast, interpreting dreams and revealing mysteries no one else could. But the most astonishing part, many of his visions point directly to Persia not just as a past empire, but as a significant player in the unfolding future. In one of the most famous visions, King Nebuchadnezzar dreams of a colossal statue made of various metals, each one representing a global empire. The chest and arms of silver. That was Persia, destined to follow Babylon as the next great world power. But this wasn't just political forecasting, it was divine orchestration. Persia's rise wasn't accidental. It was part of a sacred timeline leading to something greater. Through Daniel's eyes, we don't just see shifting kingdoms. We see God's sovereign hand guiding history toward a purpose. Persia, a nation not born from Israel's line, was still chosen for a role in this redemptive plan. It was under Persian kings that the Jewish people were allowed to return to their land. It was through Persian favor that the temple was rebuilt. This prophetic dimension challenges us to rethink how we view world events. What seems like politics or coincidence might, in fact, be prophecy in motion. Persia's presence in biblical visions reminds us that every empire past, present, or future is subject to a higher authority, and that authority is God, who continues to shape history according to His perfect plan. In the book of Daniel, we encounter several visions that reveal the rise and fall of empires, including Persia. In Daniel 2, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon has a dream of a great statue made of different materials, each representing a world empire. The silver chest and arms of the statue represent the Medo-Persian Empire, which would succeed Babylon as the dominant power in the ancient world. Later, in Daniel 7, Daniel himself has a vision of 4 beasts, representing 4 successive empires. The second beast, a bear raised up on one side, represents the Medo-Persian Empire, symbolizing its dual nature, the combined strength of the Medes and Persians. This empire would be vast, and its expansion, particularly under Cyrus, would forever alter the course of history. Another significant vision involving Persia is found in Daniel 8, where the prophet sees a ram with 2 horns, one horn representing the Medes and the other the Persians. charging in all directions, conquering vast territories. However, the vision also includes a goat with a prominent horn, symbolizing Greece and its king, Alexander the Great, who would eventually conquer the Persian Empire. These visions place Persia at the heart of God's prophetic timeline, showing that the empire's rise and fall were not accidents of history, but part of God's divine plan. Persia's time of influence was prophesied to give way to the rise of Greece. But it was during Persia's reign that God's people experienced deliverance and restoration, fulfilling the prophecies of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. Though the Persian Empire fell to Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, its influence continued to be felt during the time of the New Testament. By the time of Jesus' birth, the Persian Empire had been replaced by the Greek and later Roman empires. However, the legacy of Persian culture, governance, and administration left a lasting impact on the ancient world. One of the more mysterious connections between Persia and the New Testament is the story of the Magi, the wise men who visited the infant Jesus in Matthew 2. Many scholars believe that the Magi were likely from the region of Persia and may have been Zoroastrian priests, part of an ancient religious tradition in Persia that practiced astrology and interpreting omens. The journey of the Magi to worship the newborn king of the Jews highlights Persia's enduring connection to the biblical story. Even after the fall of the Persian Empire, the wisdom traditions of Persia continued to influence the ancient Near East, and it was Persian scholars who recognized the significance of the star that heralded Jesus' birth. Additionally, Persia's legacy of tolerance toward various cultures and religions would set the stage for the spread of Judaism and eventually Christianity throughout the Roman Empire. The Achaemenid Persian Empire was known for allowing its subjects to maintain their religious practices, a policy that would influence later empires, including Rome. This environment of religious freedom contributed to the flourishing of Jewish communities throughout the region and laid the groundwork for the eventual spread of the gospel. As we bring this exploration of Persia's biblical role to a close, it's essential to consider Iran's future in light of biblical prophecy. Many scholars and theologians believe that Iran, known in biblical prophecy as Persia, will play a key role in the events of the end times. One of the most significant prophecies involving Persia is found in Ezekiel 38-39, where the prophet describes a coalition of nations that will one day come against Israel in the last days. Among these nations is Persia, which will join forces with Gog of Magog and other nations in a massive battle known as the War of Gog and Magog. This prophecy, often seen as an event yet to occur, depicts a final confrontation between the forces of evil and God's people, with Israel at the center of the conflict. While the exact nature and timing of this war remain subjects of debate, the inclusion of Persia, modern-day Iran, in this prophecy suggests that Iran's influence in the region will continue to have spiritual significance in the end times. Additionally, Daniel's prophecies about the rise and fall of empires, including Persia, point to a broader theme of God's sovereignty over the nations. Persia's role in biblical prophecy demonstrates that no empire, no matter how powerful, is outside of God's control. God raises up nations, and He brings them down, all according to His divine plan. As we witness modern-day events in the Middle East, including tensions between Iran and Israel, it's essential to remember that these events are part of a much larger story, a story that began in the pages of the Bible and will culminate in the fulfillment of God's promises. The story of Persia, modern-day Iran, in the Bible, is one of the most remarkable examples of how God can use even the most unlikely nations to fulfill his divine purposes. From the descendants of Japheth through Madai to the rise of Cyrus the Great, Persia played a pivotal role in biblical history, from the restoration of Israel to the protection of the Jewish people in the Book of Esther. But Persia's significance doesn't end with its historical role. The prophecies of Daniel, Isaiah, and Ezekiel remind us that Persia was part of God's larger plan, not only for the nations of the past, but for the future as well. Iran's place in biblical prophecy points to its continued role in the unfolding events leading to the end times. As we look at the modern world, particularly the tensions involving Iran and Israel, it's essential to approach these events with a biblical perspective. God's sovereignty over the nations means that every kingdom, every empire, and every leader is part of his plan. The story of Persia is a testament to the fact that God can use even foreign powers to fulfill his promises and bring about his ultimate plan for salvation. Persia, known today as Iran, remains a nation of influence, not just in politics or world affairs, but in the story that spans centuries, the story written in the pages of Scripture. Far more than just a historical empire, Persia plays a continuing role in a much larger narrative, one that isn't measured by power alone, but by purpose. You see, the Bible doesn't record history for the sake of curiosity. It reveals how God works through kings, nations, and empires, even those that seem far removed from faith, to bring about his ultimate plan of redemption. Persia was one such nation. It was the backdrop for deliverance in the days of Esther, the power behind Israel's restoration through Cyrus, and a name that appears again in visions of the end times. Its story didn't end with ancient battles or royal decrees. The echoes of Persia continue today, reminding us that world events are never random. Nations rise, leaders fall, but God's hand moves steadily through time. When most people hear about Iran, they think of geopolitics, conflict, and news headlines. But what if we told you there's a deeper layer, one that doesn't make the front page, but is woven throughout Scripture? Long before Iran was called by its modern name, it was known as Persia, a nation that played a pivotal role in the biblical narrative. From the rise of kings to the rescue of God's people, Persia wasn't just a footnote in history, it was a key instrument in the hands of the Almighty. The Bible isn't just a book of spiritual truths, it's also a historical tapestry. Within it, Persia emerges not as an enemy, but often as a surprising ally. Think of the story of Esther, where a Persian king unknowingly preserved the lineage of Israel. Or consider Cyrus the Great, who was named by the prophet Isaiah over a century before he was born, a foreign ruler, chosen by God to set his people free. These are not coincidences, they are pieces of a divine puzzle. Today, when we look at the modern nation of Iran, we must resist the urge to view it solely through a political lens. Instead, we are called to see it through the eyes of faith as part of a larger, unfolding drama orchestrated by a sovereign God. This isn't just ancient history. The same God who moved through the Persian Empire still moves today. The connection between Iran and the Bible is more than a historical curiosity. It is a powerful reminder that God's hand is always at work, even in the most unexpected places. What began thousands of years ago is not finished. The story is still being written, and we are all a part of it. Persia, known today as Iran, remains a nation of influence, not just in politics or world affairs, but in the story that spans centuries. the story written in the pages of Scripture, far more than just a historical empire. Persia plays a continuing role in a much larger narrative, one that isn't measured by power alone, but by purpose. You see, the Bible doesn't record history for the sake of curiosity. It reveals how God works through kings, nations, and empires, even those that seem far removed from faith, to bring about His ultimate plan of redemption. Persia was one such nation. It was the backdrop for deliverance in the days of Esther, the power behind Israel's restoration through Cyrus, and a name that appears again in visions of the end times. Its story didn't end with ancient battles or royal decrees. The echoes of Persia continue today, reminding us that world events are never random. Nations rise, leaders fall, but God's hand moves steadily through time. The connection between Iran and the Bible challenges us to see beyond headlines and history books. It invites us to witness something greater, the unfolding of a divine story that began long ago and is still being written today. Because in the end, history isn't just a record of human achievement or failure. It's the stage where God reveals His faithfulness, fulfills His promises, and prepares the world for what's yet to come.